Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're stepping in the time machine. We're going back to 1997. We are looking at the round 10 matchup between Vassily Ivanchuk with the white pieces going against former French top player Jereon Piket with the black pieces. We are going to be looking at and discussing the Bishop's Gambit in the King's Gambit. Okay, this tournament was a very strong tournament in Linares, Spain. As you can see on the map, Linares is located in the lower portion of Spain, right? A short boat ride from the tip of northern Africa. This tournament was won by the king at the time, Garry Kasparov, with the powerful 8.5 out of 11, 7 wins, 1 defeat, and 3 draws, followed by Kramnik and British number 1 at the time, Michael Adams. And we can see Ivanchuk did not have that good of a tournament, scoring 5 out of 11, but it was very competitive tournament. So let's get right into this analysis of this King's Gambit. So e4, e5, f4 from Ivanchuk, who was rated 2740 at the time. Piquet, let me say, was 100 points lower at 2640. E takes f4 and bishop c4. A lot of players ask, they say, what's the difference, or why play bishop c4 instead of knight f3? Okay, well, this is a simple question to answer. Bishop f4, bishop f4. Bishop c4 immediately attacks the f7 square. So we know this is a major theme in the King's Gambit. So right off the back, bishop c4 immediately attacks f7. All right, what else does it do? It makes space for the king on f1, which is very important. Okay. It also avoids the G5, G4 lines that often occur after white has played knight f3. So, for example, instead of bishop c4, if you go with the traditional setup, often you will get lines like g5, for instance, and then after h4, you will get g4 hitting the knight and going into these lines. Now, even with the strong engines nowadays, there's not really a verdict on which move is actually better. But so it often depends on your personal style and which lines you like to play and which positions you ultimately want to end up in. But these are the reasons for bishop c4. Another reason is by moving the bishop out to c4 and gaining leaving this space open on f1 for the king, is that after queen h4, the king can go to f1, where it's relatively safe, and often black can then lose time after knight f3, again, attacking his queen. So yes, black takes away white's right to castle, but white is going to gain some valuable time to develop with tempi against the queen after a move like knight f3. All right, so those are the main reasons for bishop c4. All right, now, for example, to give you some more evidence to why bishop c4 is important here. Say if white just played d4, right? That's what he wants to play, right? In the King's Gambit, just simply d4 and then play bishop takes f4 and regain his pawn, and he's off to the races. And wow, if white could do this, I mean, everybody will be playing the King's Gambit. But after queen h4, notice the bishop is sitting there on f1. The king doesn't have that square, so king is forced to go to e2. And he's already in trouble after moves like b6 and d6, for example. All right. Let's say knight c3, g5, fortifying the pawn. Knight f3, queen h6. And notice in this variation, look where that bishop is on f1. It's blocked in. White's development is terrible. All right. Let's say h4, for example. g4, knight e1. Knight f6. And this is just a sample line, but this just shows you how bad the position is. Already threatening to win the rook here. Let's say king e1, and then king d8. Right, easy play for black. Right, in that sample line. Again, if d4, he can go to d2, which is probably worse. The queen just comes in, and now you're gonna lose the d pawn. So unless you play a move like king c3, and knight c6, and then you can see the floodgates open. You have ideas of bishop b4, knight f6, d5, just opening up the position. All right, and this is why you don't see d4 just played in the king's gambit. All right, but after the move bishop c4, now you have a chance to play a move like d4 as your king has a decent square to go to. So bishop c4 was chosen by Ivanchuk in this game for those reasons. c6, planning on playing d5 to blunt the attack that we mentioned on f7. All right. Another option for black is just go queen h4, go into this line, king f1. Because it's not necessarily bad for black. It's just the idea that he might lose some time with the queen. So king f1, d6. And this is a strong line also for black, where he wants to play bishop e6, again blunting the power of the diagonal against f7. Play knight to d7 and then castle queen side. It's a strong idea from black. Notice how in this line black leaves the diagonal from h4 open to d8, so the queen can just get back to safety when need be. Of course, knight f6 is possible, but after knight f3, the queen is kind of in a precarious spot here. But black is fine here also. But here, Piket chooses c6 to play d5 and establish a pawn in the center. So knight c3, d5, e takes d5, and now queen h4. What's the purpose of queen h4 check now? You're about to see. The idea is to exploit the unprotected situation of this bishop right here. Notice the bishop is hanging temporarily. So you have this check here, and of course not g3 because black would just simply capture. So king f1, and now black gains time by attacking the bishop, as you can see. So f3, d3, the bishop must be protected. F takes g2, king takes g2. Now this is an important aspect in the position because the king is exposed, as you can see, right? But can black capitalize? Okay, so just having an exposed king is not enough. Can black get perpetual check, for example? Right? That would mean something. That would mean the line is really no good for white if black could just force perpetual check right now. Can black force some kind of mating attack that will cause white to give up material? All right, these are important questions. All right, so this is what the game, is going to revolve around, right? And this determines if a line is viable or not. But it does look scary just looking at it. However, black doesn't have any development. He just has the queen out. All right. Now, when we look at the static situation, notice the majority on the queen side for white. Right. That's very important. So if black is able to muster some type of attack against the king, that will be in his favor as far as justifying all of this early activity with the queen on the king side, right? Opening up the king side, exposing the king. If the pieces just get traded off, There's no kingside attack. Well, white's king is already in the second rank and in a good position to enter the middle of the board in any endgame scenario. Along with the pawn majority on the queen side, this is fantastic because if you look at white's pawn structure, it's not damaged or anything. He has bishop here, and statically he has a healthy position. Knight f6. All right. Queen e2 check. King d8, and black wants to develop rapidly by playing bishop d6 and rook e8. All right. Remember what I just said about black's prospects in a position. Ivanchuk makes a very powerful move, queen e5. All right. It stops bishop d6. It stops that idea, and it plans on playing bishop f4, of course, and completing his own development. All right, what's the idea behind bishop f4? Well, let's give white an extra move. If white can move again, he will play bishop f4, threatening mate, right, in short order. I'll give him another move. If he can move again, he will play queen c7, king e8, queen takes c8, king e7, and d6, and that's mate. That is the idea behind queen e5. All right, of course, black has to move, but I just wanted to illustrate that to you. So, when queen e5 was played, Piket went into an endgame by playing queen f2 check, king takes f2, and knight g4, forking king and queen and forcing the endgame. Now, the question is, who has the better prospects in the ending? King g2, knight takes e5. And I would say white, due to the majority on the queen side. Bishop f4, and now knight g6. Now, if knight takes c4 here, right, he gains a bishop here, but it's kind of like jumping out of the frying pan into the fire, because after d takes c4, let's say bishop f5, white's position is so sturdy that he can ignore the attack on the c2 pawn. And again, this 5-3 majority is very dangerous. So here, just knight f3, bishop takes c2, rook he1, and look at the rapid development of white here. Right, in typical King's Gambit fashion, rook ac1, hitting the bishop, a3, planning on b4, and you can see the expansion, and it's the sample line, okay, pushing the majority up the board, knight b5, and you can see the king is coming under attack. The idea was knight d6, all right, c5, right, forcing, first of all, c5, forcing the bishop all the way back to d8, hindering black's development further and causing him to be cramped. Then following by d6 check, forcing the king to the d file, and then bringing the rook on the c file to the d file. So devastating. And that will look like this. So devastating prospects. Of course, black can improve, but I just wanted to show you that knight takes c4 is not just a simple win of the bishop here and black is equal. No, he's far from equal. So instead, Piket played knight g6, bishop g3. They're dropping back, and now white has this threat of d takes c6 and then picking up the pawn on f7. f6, knight f3, bishop b4, and now knight d4, and now bishop d7. Again, trying to compromise white's pawns doesn't really work here. Bishop takes c3, b takes c3, h5, h4, knight e5, bishop takes, knight f3, and black comes out with the upper hand. I'm sorry, white has the upper hand. You can see the four isolated pawns on the board. And white is just more active. All right. And not only more active, but up a pawn. All right, with the better position. It's gonna take a while to win, but this is a better for white. So here, instead of bishop takes c3, he just played bishop d7. 96 check by Ivanchuk. So white doesn't want to lose a pawn on g7, so takes. Now 97. Again, I highlighted the majority. Notice white has this dangerous pawn on e6 that has to be watched. Right, it has to be monitored constantly. The pawn on e6 also stops the knight on b8 from going to the natural square on d7. All right. And again, you have the 4-3 majority on the queen side. And white has the bishop here. So now, if you look at the position, it's not so bad, right? As it looked before when the queens were on the board and white's king was exposed. Position looked like, oh my God, like there's so much danger. So this is the type of positions that players of the King's Gambit often provoke black, into, right? They'll make it look like their, king is in danger. They're about to get checkmated. Then trade everything off, and now you're in this end game where, you're worse and you're fighting for your life here. And this is what's happened to black. White's king is in excellent position. His pieces are go to easy, good squares, and now black is in serious trouble. Rook hf1. This is a brilliant maneuver by Ivanchuk. I love it. There's pressure on f6. Knight c8. Knight e4. Again, more pressure on the f6 square. King e7, and now bishop h4. What's the threat, ladies and gentlemen? Knight takes f6. Knight takes f6. G takes f6, and then bishop f6 check, and picking up the rook there on h8. So rook f8 to defend that. Now c3. Now the pawns start moving. Bishop d6. King h1. Ivanchuk at this point could it's almost winning here. He could play a move like rook e1. He decides on another plan. He plays king h1. The idea here is to bring that rook on the a file to the g file, okay, and attack the hinder the pawns on the king side. So for all intents and purposes, he's taking the counterplay away from black. b5, bishop b3. I just want to make remark that the comment on black's development being so bad. Look at those knights. Look at the rook on a8. All of those pieces are very sad. Knight a6, a4. All right, so now, a4 is threatening b5, attacking the knight on a6 with the rook. Right? Black's pieces are just horribly placed. So knight c7, of course, to avoid that. A takes, c takes. All right. This just makes the majority even stronger. These trades, d4. And now a5. Here's rook f3. a4. Bishop a2. And now the rook will come off the back rank. I just wanted to go back. I almost forgot to mention why white could not take the pawn on e6. So after this move right here, so remember, knight a6, a4, knight c7, a takes, c takes, b5, d4. If knight takes e6 here, then just simply rook a e1, and it's very awkward for for black to avoid any kind of discovered checks that would drop here on f6 with the knight. So for instance, if the king tried to go to d7 or whatever, just simply bishop takes, forcing the king onto the e file, followed by a move like knight to f6. So that's why Piket did not capture on e6. He would have loved to, but couldn't do it. So back, a4, knight c7, a takes, C takes b5, d4, a5. Again, that's why he did not capture there. Rook f3, a4. Bishop stays on the diagonal, of course, to protect the pawn. And then rook a6. Again, Piket wants to be able to grab this pawn. All right, so that's why he's playing moves like this, rook a6, to try to grab the pawn and then perhaps drop the bishop, dark square bishop back to add some more protection. However, white has moves too, so he has a full tempo here on the G file against his pawn. So knight e8. So now the knight is forced into passivity, and there's no more threat against the e pawn. Rook f5, more threats. Again, I have green pieces highlighted because they're the sad pieces. They're just totally out of the game. It's amazing how strong Ivanchuk was, how he's able to, take this grandmaster and just totally, neutralize his entire game. Here is a threat, obviously, against the b pawn. If rook b6, then just d5, of course. More torture. But here, Piket decides to try to be active. He plays a3. So just rook takes b5. And now he plays g5 in order, of course, to attack the bishop, but he wants to free the knight on e8. So rook b7. Knight c7. And now Ivanchuk starts to simplify. Gets rid of the bishop here. Knight takes d6. Rook takes d6. Rook c7 check. King d8. And then rook f7. And Piket resigns. All right, he had enough. After rook f7, let's say rook e8, and then just simply bishop g3, hitting the knight. So that was the final move right there. So fantastic game by Ivanchuk in the in the King's Gambit, a quite positional game, and that's what you see a lot at these top levels, especially in the long games. Of course, if it's like a rapid game, like you saw in Fallujah, in Nippon Niachi, players aren't prepared. They might get caught out there. But when you see these long games like this game, right? 10th round, very important tournament, Linares. Usually these kind of King's Gambit games will end up being, very positional and going into the end games. You won't see the type of games you saw in the Paul Morphy era, Adolf Anderson era, where it's like sack, mate. Yeah, at the end. Things are a little more modern, and it takes a little more work, to beat these top players. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that game. Remember, chess audiobooks is on Lichess, also on chess.com. All right, so come play me in some 1 minute bullet games if you so desire, and also hit the links below, and check out the videos that are related and books that are related to the opening we just talked about today, which is King's Gambit. And also, if you don't do anything else, just hit that thumbs up button. That will help my videos grow and help my channel to grow. I appreciate you, and thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys on the next video.